community of Southwest Fresno. I am a lifelong resident of Fresno, proud to be a lifelong resident of Fresno. I grew up, I was proud also as living in the poorest area, not only in Fresno, but in Southwest Fresno. I was blessed to have my parents. I was blessed to have a community that cared about the kids in the community. And before the term "it takes a village" became popular, I grew up in a village.
I went to Washington Union, so actually at the before I went to the 6th grade, my parents moved to Easton. My father had always worked in agriculture, so for him the idea was that he wanted to have his own farm, and he wanted us to grow up on that farm. I think he still had the impression of that traditional family farm.
I grew up in a family that we had family dinners, especially big Sunday dinners, and we would talk politics, discuss politics, occasionally argue politics. So I remember that a lot. So I was always aware of politics. My parents always voted, and so I voted ever since I was old enough to register and vote.
What actually formed my outlook on politics were my grandparents and my parents. They always voted. They instilled in their children it was important to vote. They instilled in us the importance of education and knowing what was going on in your community. Even as a girl, I was active in my community. I worked with my neighborhood center. I tutored students. I worked with senior citizens. And to me, it was a joy and also a privilege to know that people in my community, not only were they hardworking laborers, but they believed in the political process and the democratic way.
What helped me form my outlook on politics was, I would say initially I wasn't too involved in politics. I was kind of more apolitical. So I always kind of remember a moment when I saw, I was over there by the courthouse, the Fresno courthouse, and I would see people protesting. And I kind of look at those folks and say, what are they protesting about? Always looked as something odd to me. It just struck me as odd. I just couldn't figure out why people were protesting. These folks, what were they protesting about?
Some of the things that I grew up associating more with the Democratic Party, the military's been integrated for a lot longer than a lot of things. And I remember my folks talking about the fact that when my dad was stationed in Missouri, he was a pilot, and if he had a mixed crew, if he had any African Americans on his crew, if you lived off base, you could not even have your whole crew over for entertaining, for dinner. You would have to do it on base because back then it was illegal to have them in your home to entertain.
So growing up in the West Side, there's a lot of things that I saw, a lot of things that that I was witness to, but were normal to me, right? They weren't things that I could say, oh, okay, well, that's an odd experience. But if I were to explain that to someone else, people would kind of maybe be astonished or, a little bit maybe awestruck.
I find it very disappointing and frustrating that Democrats work so hard for the working people, but for some reason we've lost it with the messaging. For some reason we have allowed the language, the dialogue to shape how people see certain things. They don't see unions as being the working people. A lot of the things that we have fought for, I think we need to change our messaging. We need to get the word out that the Democratic Party is working for the working person. They're working for families. They truly want to have equal opportunity for everyone.
Some of the suggestions I would give for the Democratic Party would be just to listen. I think that's what they need to not only listen, but to actually represent. So a lot of times, And you know, the reality is that they have all the statistics. They have all the answers. They know what people need, what people suffer from, and they need to act upon it. They need to realize that people are dying, you know, when it comes to healthcare. You know, it's not a question of if, right? It's a question of when.
Well, you know, what I think is Democrats, we need to work together. And even in our own families, we don't always agree with each other, but that doesn't stop us from loving each other. We may not always agree with what some Democrat has said or done, but when it comes to taking the White House back and winning congressional seats and also seats on the state and local levels, we need to be unified. And we need to come together for what we believe is in the best interest of we the people. Now, I can hate your guts, but that has nothing to do with what we want to do to make our country a good country, better country.
I think prior to that, I was already starting to look into the candidates, and the person who struck me the most was Bernie Sanders. You know, he has the principles. I think one of the things about Bernie Sanders is that he articulated what we all wanted to hear finally from a politician, right? This is it was essential to what our needs were. So, in another respect, he also set the bar high. And it's hard. I know that some people find it difficult to say, well, why can't you go from, why can't you get away from Bernie Sanders? And the fact is that once you set that bar that high, it's hard not to go back to anything else.
Initially, in fact, our entire family initially supported Bernie Sanders. We were fans of Bernie Sanders long before he decided to run as a Democrat. So of course we were very excited when he decided to run as a Democrat, because I believe he really does push for a lot of the things that I believe in about the Democratic Party.
Some of the issues that I thought were important were, when he talked about a living wage, the fight for 15. He also talked about education. So, I was fortunate enough to have an education that was affordable. That may not be the case for people down the road, for the next generation or for my kids. So I kind of see those things as important. I see the struggle to end the corruption that's, in our political system. And I think one of the things that he did, and he made us all realize, was that you could have a platform that was based on principles that also at the same time was supported by the public.
The Democratic Party, a lot of them have tried to become more centrist. And I think corporations have way too much influence in our politics and the decisions that are made in this country. And of course, the power of money, the power of the corporations, power of the banks, those were all things that Bernie was very, very outspoken against.
As far as education, we need to start working at our education. We need to start looking at how our justice system works, how it functions, how it incarcerates people, the impacts to families. We need to start looking at our healthcare. Healthcare is important. We're debating it now. We're trying to figure it out. The reality is there are viable solutions. There's a road that leads to, providing healthcare for everybody. And I think that it's just about continuing that discussion and getting to that point. And then also, there are other issues as far as globally. We need to re-establish our place as a global leader, right? And that's probably one of the primary things that we should be doing, because we're going to be facing issues like climate change. And climate change isn't just something that's faced by the United States, it's faced by the whole world. And so in order to face those problems, we're going to have to face it globally, internationally, with our partners. But if we don't have partners, then we can't do that.
Public education is a big platform, because anyone that really understands history knows that education is the great equalizer, and that to truly have equal opportunity, there are certain things that you have to have, and a good education, a good public education, I think is crucial. And there are just a lot of things that the Democrats fight for that I don't think people recognize as they're being given a better opportunity, wanting things to be fair. They're looking to have people have a good opportunity and make a better life for themselves.
I do believe that every citizen in America, whether you're rich or poor, black or white, or whatever color, should not have to worry about being sick. You should not have to worry about a family member being sick. And I think it should be a given that we have health care. And I think, when I say that, yes, but I also think that able-bodied men and women should work, and they should contribute. Don't just think, because I'm a citizen, this is what I get. I think everybody needs to contribute and ante up to the American kitty in terms of what we do to make our country better. But we all should have health care, and I think the Democrats will work to do that. And even though when we talk about the Obamacare, there were some things in Obamacare that needed to be ironed out. But it was better than what we have, and it's definitely better than what the Trump administration will be giving us. And I don't see how they can even live with themselves and think it's okay to do what they're doing. And I do believe, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. One thing you should not have to worry about is getting sick.
I know for me personally and for our family, healthcare is a huge issue. That's another thing, having grown up being in what they call an Air Force brat. I remember when I was in high school, we were in a pretty serious car accident in Arizona, and this would have been back in, I think it was '69. And back then, it's interesting because the guy that caused the accident was unemployed, uninsured, and when we all got to the hospital, he was probably the most seriously injured. But because they found out right away that he didn't have insurance, he didn't even have a job at the time, they packed him up and shipped him to the nearest county hospital, which was not close. Where my dad, who was in the Air Force, and we had medical care provided by the military plus insurance, we had great care. And so that's another thing that has helped shape my views, and that believing that access to good medical care should be for everyone, not just those that have money. And unfortunately, it's still the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. Our daughter, who is currently living and working in Germany, she has fantastic medical care and does not have to worry about the fact that she's a type 1 diabetic, which means if the Affordable Health Care Act goes away and she has to worry about pre-existing conditions, she's going to be in trouble again.
One of the things that I believe should be a part of the platform, and it's the essential part of it, is to kind of get rid of Citizens United. That's the very basis of, I believe, of all our worries, all our troubles, and I think that if they can take care of that part first, then the resolution to some of the other parts will kind of follow suit.
It's unfortunate that especially because of Citizens United, which most Democrats are fighting against, because of that, money has even become more of a problem than it was. And because elections have become so expensive, because they're not publicly funded, and because most working people don't have the ability to write $5,000 checks, it's unfortunate that they tend to rely on some of the big donors, which also happen to be corporations. And so I think the Democratic leadership needs to recognize that and get back to some real grassroots activism and education and reaching out to the people.
And it's not about giving $100, $1,000, $5,000. It's about giving what you can. And when you have a young person, well, only have $1, can I give that? That is building a good Democrat and a good citizen. Take it, say yes, thank you.
We need to be holding events where people can come and see what the Democratic Party is doing and talk to some of our Democratic elected officials. The officials need to actually be talking to the people, and more importantly than talking to them, they need to be listening to them.
Locally, we need to make sure that our local offices, because all politics are local, we need to make sure we have Democrats in those seats too. Not to mention the fact that we need to work with our state houses, because we all know, we should know that gerrymandering, the wheels are turning at the state level, so we need to make sure that we have a Democratic governor, Democratic people in our legislatures. We have to understand that's important to us too. It's not just electing the president or Congress people. We need to know what's going on the state level, because when they start drawing those lines, as you know, that's where the wheels start turning. But locally, I am in the 22nd Congressional District, and of course I am supporting Andrew, and I do think, I really feel good about that race. I think he has a chance, and we need to work to make sure. And I don't think it's a chance like we thought Hillary had a chance, because I think we became complacent. We cannot ever be complacent, ever, in an election cycle. And I think we have to get out and fight and do what we need to do. And then we also have Valadeo's seat up. And so whether we're in these particular congressional districts, we need to make sure that we reclaim those seats.
So you can't just say one thing, right, and then act a different way, right? So their history is significant. Their actions are significant. And people see that. People aren't blind. They're not dumb. They're not ignorant, right? We know the realities. We know when our legislators act in our interest, and we know when they don't. So if people see that legislators are actually acting in their interest, they become more involved. If they see that a legislator is interested, then they begin to be interested as well. If they see that our legislators are willing to put up the fight for us, then we will be able to support them.